Hi everyone, welcome to today's live webinar of the ROI of the SnapLogic Intelligent Integration Platform by Amalgam Insights. Today we are joined by Hyoun Park, CEO of Amalgam Insights, Habib Hussain, and who is the manager of financial systems at Groupon, and then Craig Stewart, SVP of Product at SnapLogic. So first, a little bit of housekeeping items. A copy of this presentation can be downloaded from webinar menu /handouts. The session recording will be sent to all the attendees and it will also be available on the BrightTalk platform. And at any point during this presentation, you can submit your questions through the questions box, and we will answer all these questions at the end of the presentation. We will also share some helpful resources at the end so that you can take the next steps. Now let me give you a quick introduction about all the speakers today. Hyoun Park is the CEO and founder of Amalgam Insights, which is a firm focused on the technology and analytics and financial tools that are needed to support emerging business models. Prior to Amalgam, Hyoun worked at both managing IT project portfolio as well as multi-million-dollar spend of network, telecom, and mobility. He has also worked at Teradyne and multiple venture-backed startups. Another speaker that we are supposed to have is Habib Hussain, who is the manager of financial systems at Groupon. Unfortunately, because of an emergency, he could not make it today, but he helped put together the slides that I'll walk you all through. So Habib has an experience of over 7 years at Groupon and over 10 years of experience at financial systems. His team are the system administrators for NetSuite and Coupa, which are Groupon's global ERP as well as their procurement tool, respectively. And we are also joined here by Craig Stewart, who is the SVP of Product Management and Marketing at SnapLogic. He's an experienced manager of technical teams with many years of experience guiding evolution of data and application integration technologies. And over his career, he has made significant contributions to the development of number of fast-growing tech companies such as Oracle, Cognos, PowerSoft, and Sybase, etc. So first, we'll explore why a company should even conduct a business value assessment. Then Hyoun will walk us through the business value assessment framework. Then I'll talk about the Groupon's case study. And then at the end, we will provide you with some helpful resources and also answer some of the questions that you might have. So with that, I will hand it over to Craig to talk about why a company should even conduct a business value assessment. Craig?
Thank you, Dhananjay. We should go forward to that slide. Good. So the whole principle of doing a business value assessment is that people want to know. So people want to know, within the business, what impact is this going to have, and understanding the benefits of using an iPaaS over and above the alternatives, including using legacy tools and hand coding. It's important that when making a significant investment for a company, that you have an idea of the impact that this may have on the business as a whole. So understanding that, doing that by quantifying the benefits, the risks, all of those things, and it's very useful to have an analytical approach to having done this to give you the right set of things which are going to impact that. And with the work that we've done with Amalgam Insights here, being able to actually quantify those things, make sure that we're taking into account all of the different variables that are going to make up the analysis is going to be very important. The result of the business value assessment is also very important to share amongst your peers in an organization and the various different stakeholders to understand what they can expect in terms of the improvements around the business to actually, in using these technologies, to improve the business itself and how that's going to impact us. So the different things that we need to take into account, obviously, most important for any vendor is going to be the benefits that you're going to accrue. And obviously, as a vendor, we're going to shout loud about those things, but it's also important to understand the costs that are going to be involved, and not just the subscription costs, but the other costs involved, the human resources, the training, all of those kind of things that are going to go into this to make it important to understand what it's going to do for your business, the impact it may then have on your business, the improvements that you can see, and obviously the risks involved in undertaking, introducing a new technology and making that, introducing it to an organization. So, in looking at this from off the top, we're looking at what do we need to understand. So we look at the various different things in terms of the analysis of what the platform can do, understanding from real customers how the platform impacts them, the considerations that they have. As a result of that, creating a representative company which you can then model in order to understand the business value. And obviously one of the most important things here is going round that loop to ensure and validate that the model that's developed is meaningful and representative. So here at SnapLogic, we actually engaged with Amalgam Insights to undertake this business value analysis using their the deep knowledge that they have around the area of creating and understanding the value that can be associated with the introduction of technology. Now, we engaged Amalgam Insights, but we did not influence or change the findings of the study. So Hyoun put in a great deal of work, and we provided, as I say, we provided feedback, but we didn't actually change the findings. Amalgam Insights, Hyoun has done a lot of work here and has advises anyone that takes this to make sure that the things that they put into this work for them as described within the applicability. This is applicable to enterprise companies who are implementing a technology like this. And obviously for every company, there's going to be variation. So the customers assessed, as it says, were provided by SnapLogic. So these were SnapLogic customers, and Hyoun was able to have a dialogue with those customers to understand the variables that went in from their perspective and validated that. And as we see later, we'll talk about the Groupon use case as well, about how that actually validates the model. And Hyoun will, I'm sure, explain a little around the principles that he's applied, including gap, to understand the metrics here being meaningful. Okay, so
before I hand it over to Hyoun, let's take a quick poll. So what is the greatest barrier to an adoption of a modern integration platform like iPaaS? And you can use the voting tab to actually put in your vote. So is it the long-term contract with the current technology vendor preventing you from adopting an iPaaS solution? Is it the inability to quantify the benefits of an iPaaS solution a hindrance? Or is it that as an organization you prefer, your organization prefers custom code? Or is it that you have service providers that are doing integrations on your behalf? Or are you unaware of the merits of an iPaaS platform as an organization? So I'll wait for a minute for everyone to provide their responses.
All right, and as we're waiting for these, your answers to come in. Hi, this is Hyoun. I'm just looking at these answers here. I think it's an interesting mix in that some of you might be stuck in a status quo. Some of you might want a better solution but are unaware of how to quantify and articulate the benefit. Some of you may simply prefer to build it yourselves. So this is a variety of options that end up being relevant to your approach in trying to figure out what you're trying to do next. Think of this in terms of what keeps you from taking advantage of the technologies that are out there at the end of the day. So we're starting to get some results. It's interesting to see the variety of challenges that currently exist out in the, among the audience of attendees right now.
All right, so I'm just gonna wait for maybe 30 more seconds just to get everyone's feedback. And yeah, so I think it seems like that we have like the top three answers, Hyoun, are inability to quantify benefits, the organization prefers custom code, and the organization has service provider doing their integration. So that is 28% for all those three top answers. Can you please provide little color on that? What our audience?
First, I find it interesting that nobody said that being unaware of the merit of this approach was the greatest barrier. So I find that promising. Simply from a pure technology perspective, thinking as how everything is moving to the cloud and how we require more agile and rapid tools from a data management perspective and data integration perspective, that this is not the challenge. However, a variety of other challenges are here. One is simply if a service provider is doing the integration, frankly, it's been an outsourced process, and either you don't have the visibility or the service provider is doing enough there to provide timely results, perhaps. If you prefer custom code, you've built something and you are used to being able to code and create things on the fly, and you think that's the best way to work. And as a result, you have this is the approach that you either want to take, or you feel like something's going to break if you move to another approach, which is also a legitimate concern. Obviously, we've all been in environments where we're dealing with spaghetti integrations, and that have just been kind of built out over time. The inability to quantify the benefits is a common one as well. I actually run into this a lot from a technology perspective. It's part of why I became an industry analyst. After doing years both in tech startups and in enterprise IT, I realized that one of the challenges that IT was having in investing in better technologies was the inability to appropriately articulate the benefits that they were getting in a way that resonated with financial and executive audiences. So it's easy to say this is cooler, or this process is faster, or we have much greater computing or data processing or data integrating capability, but that doesn't necessarily translate into a business benefit that is understood by line of business and financial gatekeepers that are preventing you from making progress. So that's part of why I do the work that I do, because this inability to quantify the benefits is a legitimate concern. So with that, we'll move to the overview of the actual business value analysis. So as I looked at the actual value of SnapLogic, speaking with SnapLogic customers, we found our team looked at the numbers, and they look great. Annual ROI of 631%, payback period of 1.8 months, 3-year net present value of 2.6 million. And basically what this means is that for a standard deployment that we looked at, if you put in $1 into your project at the end of the day, you ended up getting $6 of value back. Once you put that initial investment back, it took about almost 2 months before you get your that payback back in value, which is an exceptional number that it will pass the hurdle from a standard project management perspective. Companies typically expect a payback within a year for an investment that they make within something, even if they're pretty aggressive. So 2 months is definitely within the scope of rapid payback. And then the 3-year net present value of 2.6 million. So these are great numbers and all, but not too helpful if you don't know how to get there and you don't know how to calculate these numbers for yourself, either for SnapLogic or frankly for other IT projects that you might be looking at. So let's start looking at how these projects start, how you can start thinking about the cost structure, the benefits, and the actual value in a way that'll be helpful both as you consider perhaps SnapLogic, an integration platform as a service, or other IT investments in general. So first of all, when we looked at the value, we didn't just look at one customer. We interviewed 4 customers to see how they how they were using SnapLogic, how their implementation process went, how they looked at SnapLogic as a vendor, and how they actually started using them, and then how that usage started growing and changing over time. We looked at a network services company, an educational services company, a finance and risk management company, as well as a utilities company. So, and we found that in general, the value proposition was pretty similar across these areas because all 4 of these companies that used a lot of data, had a lot of data sources, were for the most part using big data. When you think about Hadoop unstructured data, moving past the challenges of structured data and trying to deal with the enormity of the challenges of big data in general. So we're talking about enterprise companies with enterprise data challenges here. And when we put these together, we found that these organizations were somewhat similar in size, and we put these numbers together to create a composite organization for the ROI. In this case, a composite organization consisted of having 5 data engineers working on integration processes, an additional engineer and additional admin added over the 3 years of first 3 years of the deployment to support business growth. We saw that in general, there was about a 3x increase in data pipeline or workflow productivity. Another way of saying that is a 75% reduction in time to create pipelines and workflows. For those of you who have spent perhaps several months working on a Spark pipeline, for instance, this is going to be a big deal. Think about moving from 3 months to a couple of weeks to for big data integration or for a hairy and challenging integration that requires a lot of data variety because you have that in place. So that was one of the key value propositions. We saw that in general, we saw about 12 weeks. It took about 12 weeks to complete a typical integration prior to using SnapLogic. And you should keep this in mind because if this fits your organization, you're thinking, well, it takes us about 2 to 3 months to finish off a single integration that we're really working on. And we've got 10, 20, 30, 50 of these in the pipeline. How are we going to get there? Your current approach is probably going to take you several years just to get to the point where you have decent integration that can work on a scalable and repeatable basis. This might be a good reason to start moving to a platform approach, which is more repeatable. And then we assumed from an organizational perspective, $103,000 average annual salary for an integration specialist. And then we added 50% in overhead. So these might include benefits, insurance, the actual cost of the desk, the laptop, the office space, the network, everything involved in the cost associated with supporting that integration engineer. So these are the assumptions we made. Obviously, as your organization has different assumptions, you are going to play with the numbers either to move them up or down based on your business's challenges. So as we looked at this composite organization, we saw that from a 3-year cost perspective, we saw a total cost of about $1.5 million. So we didn't just get to this ROI by shrinking the cost into an unreasonable number. We didn't just say, oh, the cost of this might be, call it $20,000, $30,000. We really took a realistic cost structure into account, which included the cost of SnapLogic itself, which was a third of the cost reflected here. And this was kind of an average cost, I would say. Your cost will obviously vary based on the scale and size of what you are planning to deploy. We also looked at training and potential consulting costs because some of the organizations that we interviewed also were already using consultants from a integration perspective and had to include those consultants as part of this process. So we're not going to take out those costs arbitrarily because in real life, there are companies that have these types of costs. So we saw that from a realistic perspective, there were some minimal consulting costs associated with getting SnapLogic started up for those companies that already had some sort of IT consulting in place to support their data integration efforts. The training costs here, which you see on the upper side, $65,000, are really focused on just the cost of getting an engineer up to speed. Call it the 2 weeks that are necessary to really get that engineer up and running as it would take for, frankly, a variety of technologies. But that's real time and real cost to your company, and it's something that you should take into your consideration. If a solution takes a couple of weeks to learn versus 3 months, 6 months, a year to get up to full speed, that makes a big difference from a productivity perspective and should be considered as a training cost. And then finally, there's the personnel cost itself. There are people who will be working this software just as you would with any technology. It's important not to take that for granted. People tend to honestly be the most expensive part of any software, any technology project, and it's because you need skilled people to actually do the work at the end of the day. Technologies rarely fully automate things all by themselves and can't always just be left to set it and forget it year after year after year without at least minimal alignment to your business or your organization. That's just how this works. You're going to use additional data sources over time. You're going to need to make tweaks as your own business logic changes. That's something that no vendor can fully build into their system all by themselves. That's just part of being, especially a large enterprise. If you're a $1 billion plus enterprise, you're just going to be making changes in your organization and in your technology logic over time. So that leads to the personnel costs, and you need trained engineers. And of course, this will depend on your geography, whether your data engineers are in India or South America or the Midwest of the United States, even versus the coastal regions. Those will make a difference from a salary perspective. So, but this gives you an idea of where the cost structure looks like for what we talked about, 5 engineers plus an engineer added over time, and being able to run this for over 3 years in an enterprise environment. And then we saw the benefits that we saw kind of from a technical perspective, which we're going to align to financial, are that the time to create a workflow pipeline went from before 12 weeks to 2 to 3 weeks afterwards. The number of workflows or pipelines created per year typically went from about 5 per year to about 20. So definitely a significant increase in creation. And then there was also an improvement in the time to execute integration. Before, we would see organizations take 30 to 45 minutes simply to execute each integration, and that was moved to 1 to 2 minutes after moving to SnapLogic. So that's an additional productivity metric to take into account, simply how much time are you losing to actually running the integration with your current either code or your platform or solution. So as a result, as we looked at the benefits associated with SnapLogic in each of these organizations, we saw that there were 2 ways to split out these benefits. On the left side, you can see direct IT benefits, which are the benefits associated with IT, the engineers, the productivity, all the stuff that feels good, but you may have trouble articulating. That the productivity and speed that feels great, but perhaps you didn't get to the numbers. When we looked at the numbers, we actually saw a $5 million benefit over 3 years from an IT side. And that mainly came from reduced workflow and pipeline and development costs. So think about you have 5 engineers. They cost $100,000 plus $150,000 per year. If you're able to take away 2/3, 3/4, 4/5 of their work, you start getting to, you take away 60 to 80% of that work, and all of a sudden you get to a point where perhaps only 1/3 or 1/4 of your data engineer team is needed to do the work that you would have needed to do previously. However, here's the reality. We are so overflooded with data sources, data integration, data management right now, that it's not like the other 3 data engineers suddenly have nothing to do. This just means they can finally get on to moving on to all the other challenges. We're in a world where we talk about 90% of the data in the world is created in the last 2 years. That means, from a practical perspective, data is tripling year after year, and this is not something that's going to change anytime soon. So we've got this challenge of trying to figure out from an enterprise perspective, how do we get this data that's tripling and then fit it into all of our schemas, our integrations, our actual platforms. And the time saved leads to significant savings as we look at just that workflow and pipeline development cost reduction, as well as the additional work that is able to be tackled as well. And this might be about moving employees to other projects that are perhaps more important or more strategic to the organization. This might also be, there's also some residual benefits from eliminating prior software and hardware, especially if you have an expensive integration, either platform or a set of solutions at this point, or custom code that is expensive to maintain on an annual basis. So there were some cost saved there. And then at the bottom, I have 2 categories here around labor reallocated to operational projects versus revenue producing projects. And the reason I have these split up is that we talked about the cost of an engineer being basically $150,000 a year if we're talking about US-based integration engineers or Western Europe. However, there's another way to think about the value of a project. On average, the average company, at least US-based company, brings in about $300,000 a year, give or take, per employee in revenue. So if you are dealing with a project that has any sort of top-line benefit, it may be that the company actually looks at that number rather than the engineer's number in terms of the actual value that is created. And that $300,000 value is just an average. Larger companies often have more. Apple, amazingly, has $2 million a year in revenue per employee, which just speaks to what kind of a behemoth they are from a cash-creating perspective. But you get the idea. Just because the engineer makes $150,000 doesn't mean they're not working on something that might be worth $1 million. So think about where the value is actually coming in, because this isn't about this is about figuring out where the company is getting additional value at the end of the day. And then on the right side, you can see there are also line of business improvements that also occurred in various organizations, which included the value of product development as companies created new data-driven products or data-associated products. Value of supplier onboarding or supply chain acceleration to improve supply chain and procurement processes. There's a contribution to value of increased revenue for companies that use these integration processes to support transactions and actual sales. And then there's some line of business productivity benefits as well for internal employees who saw additional productivity by being able to use these more automated workflows. And we saw that on average, as we looked at businesses, there was about $200,000 a year in benefit when adding up these value propositions. And of course, this can vary wildly based on the utilization of the technology. So going over the benefits, we see, as we said before, about $5 million in benefits from an IT perspective, about $600,000 from a business line of business perspective. So here's kind of what a summary of these calculations will look like. If this is hard to read, don't worry. You will be able to download the slides afterwards, as well as be able to, SnapLogic will be able to also provide a deeper dive into these types of calculations. But just to give you an idea that there's ways to lay out these numbers in ways that allow you to quickly see the benefits, the operational expenses, kind of the cash flow output, and then the financial numbers here at the bottom, which frankly are probably more meaningful to your project management and your financial team in terms of being able to compare this project or your potential project to other projects that they're looking at on an apples-to-apples basis, or kind of, at least a financial apples-to-apples basis. This is always a challenge from a project perspective, that you're not just competing against all the other great projects in IT, but potentially all the other great projects in sales and supply chain and marketing. You're all looking for budget and trying to validate this from a business perspective. And by taking this type of approach, you can at least take a financial view perspective that where the numbers match up favorably to other projects that your company is considering. So here's a look at the cumulative costs and benefits. You can see that it's basically linear. Both the costs and benefits ended up being year over year pretty consistent over time, leading to the value that was created. And this is a different look. So this is subtracting the benefits from the cost to get to cash flows. So this is what you can expect to see. The blue line is what you would expect to see from a gross cash perspective. The orange line is how you would calculate this from a post-tax perspective. Now, this assumes a relatively low tax rate of 25% based on the fact that, as you may know, in the U.S., there was a big tax cut for corporate tax. We now have a 21% corporate tax rate, which significantly lowers the actual tax contribution associated with any sort of profit. So that's reflected in this number. We used to use a higher number, more in the 35% range for large organizations, but this reflects that recent tax cut. Next, looking at this from a benefits and cost perspective, This just shows you the similar type of data, except on a year-to-year basis. This may be another way to be able to show what your organization will be expecting to spend versus the benefit that they will receive. And this orange line shows kind of that net benefit that is happening year over year. So in addition, it's important to look at these benefits both from a financial and a qualitative perspective. I know I've been spending a lot of time talking about the quantitative benefits, and yes, that matters. But you also need to make an executive case, and you have to make a case for the people who will be using this technology at the end of the day. Business value is about holistic business, looking at the holistic business at the end of the day. So I don't want to make it sound like you can just make a financial case and that will all automatically win over everybody. You also want to be able to talk to issues such as improved time to market for potential products that you're imagining. So you don't quite know what the products are yet, but being able to improve that time to market based on the depth and breadth of integration that's necessary. Accelerating business initiatives. You'll want to be able to talk to companies that are looking at integration. You'll want to look at greater insight that might be possible based on bringing more data sources and data types together to line of business analysts and data analysts. You want to look at being able to train on a consistent user interface, especially if you have multiple integration solutions at this point and are trying to consolidate to a single platform from a usability perspective. These are benefits that may be less quantifiable and more apparent from a user interface or a user design perspective. But that said, these do matter as well, and it's important to speak the language of all of your stakeholders. So I say that just to say that you should also be aware of these benefits as well, and always speak the language of all of your stakeholders as you try to get this type of project in gear. So with that, I'll pass this back to Dhananjay to talk about an example of one of these companies and how they dig in from a corporate perspective.
Thank you, Hyoun. So I'm going to walk you all through the Groupon case study in light of this ROI, measurement of ROI for the SnapLogic platform. So Groupon is currently with SnapLogic and they are in their third year. And some of the benefits, just to recap what Groupon is, Groupon is a global e-commerce marketplace, and it is serving customers currently in over 28 countries. It has over $3 billion in revenue, over 10,000 employees, and over 35 million registered users. So those are a lot of users. And I'm sure a lot of you have used Groupon for coupons for businesses around you. And Groupon used their goal was to really create an integration across all the cloud-based systems that they were using. So on the left, you see, they are using NetSuite for ERP, Anaplan for finance and FP&A, and Workday for HR. And so Groupon installed Anaplan to consolidate all their ERP data into an Anaplan consolidation system. And luckily, SnapLogic was there to help. With SnapLogic, they were able to improve the processing time by over 98%. They were able to gain 3 times the productivity with respect to building and running their integration pipelines. In fact, they were able to reduce down the processing time from 45 minutes down to just 45 seconds. And they were able to launch their first pipeline within weeks of deploying the SnapLogic platform. And earlier, so before Groupon adopted the SnapLogic iPaaS platform, they were reliant on developers to really integrate across applications. but by adopting the platform, they were able to realize the efficiencies efficiencies of scale that a platform provides, and that provided them with better closing time for their month-end projects, and they were able to develop these integration pipelines on their own rather than having to rely on the developer resources. So this is essentially Groupon's ROI. Groupon was able to realize over 551% in annual ROI from using the SnapLogic platform. So before SnapLogic, before they used SnapLogic, consolidation of financials was very cumbersome, because they had to get data and move the data across different systems, such as moving data from Anaplan to Workday or Workday to NetSuite. In addition to that, error logging was also very cumbersome when you are doing things through hand coding, and it was really a tough process for them, and it led to a lot of misses for opportunity for full automation. And as I mentioned earlier, before the SnapLogic platform, the Groupon team was reliant on the engineering team to develop and maintain these integration systems. In fact, they were also reliant on a third-party solution company to provide them with automation for different processes. But after they adopted the SnapLogic platform, they were able to easily take advantage of the inbuilt connectors for NetSuite, Anaplan, and Workday. And SnapLogic was also able to provide connection of all these three systems with the Coupa procure-to-pay system. And with that, they were able to free up some development resources, and they were able to, as a result, transition these third-party solution processes and move them in-house. And with that, they were able to save over $40,000 a year. Now, Groupon, by taking advantage of the SnapLogic platform, they were also able to build a connection with the banking provider by utilizing a new banking file format, and that saved them around 7 cents per transaction by using this new format. And when you are doing millions of transactions a year, all those savings add up significantly. In addition to that, the Groupon team was able to globalize the indirect procurement process by transitioning all the users to Coupa, and SnapLogic was able to meet the need of consolidating all the three NetSuite ERP systems into a single consolidated system for the finance and FP&A. So some of the direct IT benefits that Hyoun pointed to were reduction of the workflow and pipeline development costs. They were also able to reduce the development timeline from weeks to minutes. They were able to also reduce the integration execution time, so all the month-end process were able to run very quickly by taking advantage of the elasticity that the SnapLogic platform provides. And also they were able to eliminate prior hardware and software and just rely on the SaaS platform. So with that, I will hand it over to Craig to walk us through the key takeaways. Craig?
Thanks, Dhananjay. Thanks, Hyoun. I think that's been very interesting. The things that we're able to realize here, understanding that we have a significant benefit to customers using SnapLogic, that ROI number is obviously pretty impressive. And validating that with the Groupon use case, particularly important. I think it also shows, it will vary between different companies, different sizes of enterprises, where you are in the country, as Hyoun pointed out. But that payback period then of 1.8 months, that's a really significant thing, to be able to understand that you may be making an investment here, but there is a significant benefit to the business from adopting such technology. And if you're starting to not only see benefit from using a tool, but also seeing that benefit in financial terms within the organization within that kind of period of time is really significant, and should make any business sit up and take some notice. And who can resist when we're talking millions of dollars actually being value that's added to the business in that 3-year period. So I think that's very interesting to see those things. And the next slide, just to give you some idea of some of the resources that we've now made available. If you would like to undertake this ROI calculation yourself, the link on the slides to our website, so snaplogic.com/ROI-calculator, will take you to a web page that will give you the short form of the ROI calculator, allow you to do that initial ROI calculation yourself. In the attachments to this webinar, there is the business value analysis report, so the report from Amalgam Insights, that you can take a look at that detail. Other things that we have in there, the iPaaS buying guide, give you some guidance on the things to take into account when looking at purchasing an iPaaS. There is the link to the SnapLogic free trial. We encourage you to take a look. Do feel free to sign up for a free trial with your business email address if you have not yet looked at SnapLogic or would like to explore that a little bit more. And lastly, if you are interested in an in-depth ROI analysis for your organization, do reach out to us. Links on the SnapLogic website through the Contact Us in order to get in touch with us to actually do that more in-depth analysis, taking into account the fine details of your particular company. So that's a different thing to the general ROI calculator on our website. This is a much more in-depth report, taking into account many of the more fine details. So with that, I think I'll hand it back to Dhananjay if we have some questions.
Sure. So yeah, thanks, Craig. So we do have some questions on the line. So let's take the first question. So one of the viewers is asking, so if we have some integration developers in India, does this ROI model have the ability to take that into account? Hyoun, can you please can you answer that question, please?
Yeah, so I'd say that it can. Frankly, wherever your developers are, you would use this ROI model, and you would use the cost of the developer, the average cost of the developer, wherever they are. Obviously, that amount will change depending on your location, and it will change the ROI, frankly, because the value of automation is value of the platform is partially dependent on the cost of the developers and the developer time being saved, combined with the time being saved. So yes, it will make a difference, but you can use this for developers from any location, as long as you have an idea of what the average cost or average compensation of that developer is.
Okay. Thanks, Hyoun. So a kind of a follow-up question to that. So are there any limitations of this study? I work for a startup. Can I take advantage of this ROI calculator?
So the
Hyoun?
general concept of the ROI calculator should work for you just fine. But what I can't speak to and what SnapLogic would be better equipped to is how that might affect you from a cost perspective based on how big you are and what you're trying to do.
Okay. Thanks, Hyoun. So I think a follow-up question on the cost as well. So I think it seems like the question. So the audience, so one of the audience members wants to know. So in that study, it mentions that the cost was $237K. So I think they are referring to the before the SnapLogic platform is adopted. So that cost. So what is included in that cost? So
So there are several components to that cost. One is the first year cost of on average for SnapLogic, but there's also a significant cost associated with the employees going through any sort of vendor selection process. Anytime you're looking for a new solution, you're testing it out, you're doing the proof of concept, there's a labor cost associated with that. So we took that into account, the weeks that it will take for employees to be able to actually go through that process, and the time you might spend, frankly, doing some sort of request for X. That is time that is spent getting to the final result. And then there's also a training aspect of simply learning how to use SnapLogic in the first place. Those were the key components from a cost perspective, from the initial start cost perspective.
Okay. Craig, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that's right. I think the pure cost of the software is only one component of that initial cost. I think Hyoun outlined that pretty well.
All right. So then one more question we have. So what do you picture is the skill set of someone who is a data integration engineer?
Okay, shall I take that? So a data integration engineer today is a similar skill set to those that would have been doing an ETL engineer in prior generations. So people that understand the data and the endpoints that you're working with for that data, the transformations and things that you're going to be doing on those. So it varies between different companies and the different complexities of the tasks that people have. But in general, it will be someone who understands the data and the applications.
So I guess one more question we have. I guess it's more of a so it's an interesting one, a little bit off topic, I will say, but I will still try to answer that. So one obstacle we have run into with using the tools is inability of the vendor to keep up to date with technology, such as updates to AWS technologies, Hadoop distribution vendors, etc. Custom coding is a way to manage this risk. How do you propose managing this with an iPaaS tool? Craig, maybe you can help answer that.
Well, I think this actually highlights one of the benefits of using an iPaaS tool, and that is that a company whose business is not developing software, they have no business constantly having to keep up to date with changes to the environment, the AWS, as you say, the Hadoop distribution stack nightmare, and all of those things. Whereas if you delegate that to an iPaaS vendor, that's one of the benefits that a company will get from actually then essentially contracting the maintenance of those kind of things to the software vendor rather than having to do it yourself. If you are using an iPaaS tool, you should be concentrating on the business of your business and not the business of integration.
Yeah, great.
Yeah,
I think those are, yeah, go ahead, Hyoun.
Yeah, I would just add to that saying that with it's a lot harder to do ETL and data integration than it used to be when I used to do this for real, say 10, 15 years ago. Back then it was basically enough to just be able to do SQL, some basic transformations, and some basic coding that allowed you to change data from one format to another. The transformations, frankly, were not that hard, and then you just had some pipeline problems from a pure loading perspective. Nowadays, with everything from SQL to NoSQL, streaming, message queuing, all the issues that you're going to run into with both fast data and big data, as well as incipient challenges of unstructured data. If you can find a vendor that has a roadmap that is well suited to your data strategy, that vendor is going to be able to put far more resources into the integration than any IT organization will. I do think a key is to look at that, both current integrations and roadmap capabilities, and make sure that alignment is there.
Thank you, Hyoun. So that wraps up all the questions that we have. I want to thank you all for attending this today's live webinar. And as Craig mentioned, please take advantage of all the resources that are attached with this webinar. Check out our free trial. So have a great rest of the day. Hope to see you soon on a future webinar. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Hyoun.
Take care.